Hi, I'm James Dunn. Welcome to the Inside Network.
I'm going in depth with Grant Atchison, Head of Real Estate Funds Management at the Alceon Group. Welcome, Grant.
Thanks, James. Good to be here.
A real pleasure to have you. Grant, can you describe for us the Alceon Australian Property Fund?
So the fund's set up as a diversified real estate, infrastructure and fund that has exposure to debt as well. It's largely set up as a 50-50 strategy, 50 listed, 50 unlisted. In the unlisted allocation, we have an exposure to across the risk spectrum, core 70%, value add 20% and 10% development.
What kind of investors did you have in mind when you were designing the fund?
Look, largely investors who don't usually get access to unlisted assets, advice groups, and particularly those who run NDA structures, which normally only hold listed securities.
So what led you to design a fund that allowed MDAs to, or gave MDAs the opportunity that this fund gives them?
Many years ago, back in my asset consulting days, we set up a fund structure or an investment strategy for a group called Financial Index, now known as Findex. We set that up to actually allow them to get access to their unlisted assets. We started implementing that strategy from about 2011. Fund's been running about 11 years now. And over the journey, we've made it available to other groups and particularly MDA operators.
How dynamic can you be in terms of your asset allocation in determining where you place capital at any time? I mean in an asset or asset class within your universe.
Yeah, look, we're very much a bottom-up operator looking for individual opportunities, but that doesn't mean we don't take notice of where markets are. As we're allocating capital, we're focused on liquidity, we're focused on relative value between listed and unlisted assets, and there are times when we just don't own an entire sector. We went through for a period where we didn't hold any retail assets. At some point they got too cheap and we bought them, but so we're somewhat agnostic to the overall sector allocation.
Right, so does that mean even if a sector itself is being underweighted, there might be a particular asset within that sector where the numbers do stack up for you?
Oh, absolutely. And so my example before of retail is a classic one where we took a position in a value add asset in Caboolture, Queensland, delivered 16% IRR over about a 7-year period. Great outcome in an environment where retail was delivering negative returns.
Mm-hmm. In the current economic climate, where are you deploying money?
It's hard. It's hard right at the moment. So, we're looking for particularly, inflation protection, interest rate protection positions. So things like infrastructure. We've got some renewable energy positions we've just deployed into. Real estate debt, as we've talked about in the past, is a possibility within the portfolio. And very opportunistic type allocations such as standalone value-adding type assets. So where at the moment they represent about 20% of our unlisted allocation.
Do you only invest in Alceon originated deals?
No, the fund's set up to be a fund-to-fund structure. We invest both with Alceon and external managers. Examples include Palisade in the infrastructure side, Dexus, Charter Hall, a whole raft of institutional grade funds, as well as holding some direct positions with external partners. Alceon funds at the moment make up about 27% of the overall unlisted allocation. So a real diversity.
There's got to be some element of top-down consideration. So where and how have you positioned the portfolio for inflation and interest rates and where those drivers are likely to go? Yeah,
so very much looking for those investments which have some sort of inflation protection within them. So within the commercial property sector, you're looking for office assets that have rental increases based on inflation kickers. In infrastructure land, it's groups like Transurban, where you have toll roads which have got bumps in inflation with tolls. And then real estate debt's another example where the loans that have been written have moved from being fixed rate loans to variable rate loans as rates increase.
So what's the liquidity situation there for investors in the fund? What Does that change over time and with situations?
Look, we've never had an instance where we haven't been able to provide liquidity over the 11-year journey. So, having said this, the fund was born, post GFC when we saw examples of funds freezing. So we learnt a lot of the lessons from that period, and so we structure and manage liquidity very closely.
How has the fund performed since inception?
We've done just under 11% for over the 11-year period, or 11% per annum. Both listed and unlisted have performed comparably, as we would expect over long periods of time. I mean, they're invested in the same underlying assets, so you expect that over the very long term, the returns converge. A large proportion of that, about half, I should say, is made up of the income and the balances of capital return.
And in your conversations around the marketplace with advisory groups, where predominantly or how do they position it within client portfolios? In the income generating part of the portfolio, or is there sort of a kind of spillover into the alternative sector of the portfolio?
Yeah, look, property generally has its own allocation within it, and many groups include property within alternatives. There's sort of no standardised arrangements in the industry, which makes it more difficult. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely a contributor to the income side, but with that downside protection, there's elements of defensiveness. So you might get an allocation from defensive alternatives.
And ideally, an investor in your fund, if you spoke to them personally, what would you say would be the time frame that they should really give this fund to see how it'll perform, ideally in the way you've designed it?
Yeah, look, the underlying positions are, some of them are very long-term holds. So, we would expect that someone would want to be in this for 5 years plus. Having said that, a 3-year journey has also been quite positive for many investors. But we would encourage people to look more to the long term.
And what's the size of the fund, Grant, now? And where would you expect to run into capacity issues?
Right at the moment, or as of this morning, about $620 million in the fund. We won't hit capacity issues until well in excess of $2 billion.
Grant Atchison, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, James.